strengthening Ukraine's air defense? And will there be a Tomahawk strike? The TSN team has gathered the most important updates at this moment. It's 6 o'clock on the clock. You are watching TSN Online. My name is Natalia Yarmola. Let's sum up the first results of this Tuesday together. The Russians shelled Kharkiv with KAB bombs. As always, they struck late in the evening when people were going to bed. More than 50 people were injured. One of the strikes hit the hospital grounds. Energy facilities were also targeted, so part of Kharkiv is currently without power. A TSN film crew is working at the scene. And here's what our Yulia Boyko managed to find out.
The Russians are once again attacking Kharkiv with guided aerial bombs. This time, they hit a hospital where more than 100 patients were present at the time of the strike. The blast wave shattered windows, damaged buildings, and dozens of people suffered injuries and acute stress reactions. The occupiers carried out the airstrike at around 10 o'clock in the evening. Preliminary reports say 3 guided aerial bombs were launched, one of which hit the hospital grounds. The powerful blast wave affected nearby buildings and civilian businesses.
We provide prosthetics and supply rehabilitation equipment to people with disabilities. The bombs hit at about 11:30. We came here. Everything was destroyed. We can only get into the building through the windows because all the doors are blocked. The Russians have no idea where, what, or how. They don't care who they bring this misery to.
The hospital suffered the most destruction. In the building where patients with endocrine diseases were treated, the windows and doors were blown out. At the moment of the strike, there were more than 100 people inside. They were evacuated, but as a result of the strike, more than 50 patients were still injured. Most are suffering from acute stress reactions, but there are also wounded.
One woman was transferred to a neighboring hospital and 6 others received assistance on site. There are no severe or critical cases. These are severe cuts to the skin which have been directly caused by sharp glass fragments. At this precise moment in time, there are absolutely no patients currently located within this particular building. All have been transferred to other departments of our hospital.
The blast wave also damaged power lines. As a result, several districts of Kharkiv were left without electricity.
Approximately 30,000 subscribers are without power. Our municipal services are working, and the energy workers are doing their best to restore power to the residents of Kharkiv as quickly as possible. They are targeting the energy sector in general, generation facilities, transformers, substations, and power transmission networks. In other words, they are doing everything possible to cut off the power supply.
At the sites of the strikes, energy workers are currently on the job, continuously supported by municipal workers and rescuers. They are clearing away glass debris, restoring temporary shelters, and preparing buildings to seal up the broken windows. Yulia Boyko and Oleksiy Bugayenko, Kharkiv, TSN 1+1.
Power outages occurred in 2 regions at once due to enemy shelling. The Russians attacked civilian infrastructure in Chernihiv region with a wave of drones. A fire broke out. 36 settlements in the Nizhyn district were left without electricity. Currently, electricians are working to restore power. The occupiers also struck a private enterprise in Novorossiversk with drones. And at night, they attacked critical infrastructure facilities in the Kirovohrad region. 5 settlements were left without power. Due to the consequences of the attack, Ukrzaliznytsia announced changes to the schedule of suburban trains. Buildings at the impact sites were damaged. The fires have already been extinguished. And in the Donetsk region, part of which had been without power for almost 2 days, electricity has finally been restored to homes. However, a number of suburban trains are running with delays due to the lack of voltage in the network. And the Russians continue to destroy residential neighborhoods. 8 guided aerial bombs were dropped on Kostiantynivka, and 3 drones struck as well. 2 city residents did not survive the enemy attack. 4 more were wounded, and 1 person was injured in Lyman. The Russians hit the city with an aerial bomb and a drone. Evacuation under enemy drones. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, police are evacuating people from frontline villages and urging them not to delay evacuation. There is a constant risk of airstrikes and artillery shelling here, and FPV drones attack from the air. The White Angels crew is transporting residents to safer areas. This is an evacuation video filmed in the Sinelnikove district. This time, they managed to evacuate several pensioners who could not escape the shelling on their own. They had to act very quickly, as the enemy shows no mercy to civilians. The police urge residents not to risk their lives and to agree to evacuate.
FPV.
Everyone, quickly to the shelter.
Let's go.
An FPV drone launched by Russian terrorists has reached the center of Kharkiv for the first time. reported the Institute for the Study of War. The occupiers are trying to expand the area of impact. Thus, an enemy drone was spotted in the Kyievsky district of Kharkiv. It is likely that Russian forces used another UAV carrier to transport the FPV drone a distance of 10 to 20 kilometers from the target. Meanwhile, fierce battles are raging at the front. The Pokrovsk direction remains the hottest spot. Just in the past day, the enemy carried out 52 assaults on this section of the front, according to the General Staff. Significant activity is also observed in the Oleksandrivsk direction, where 28 attacks were repelled. The defense forces destroyed approximately 1,200 occupiers, 5 tanks, 29 artillery systems, and a significant amount of other equipment. At the same time, according to the analytical portal Deep State, the enemy has occupied Chernihiv and advanced near Chernihiv in the Donetsk region. Tomahawks and the sequence of steps in cooperation. Volodymyr Zelenskyy will discuss this with Donald Trump. The president has confirmed a meeting in Washington this week. Zelenskyy will also meet with senators and congressmen, as well as representatives of military and energy companies. The Ukrainian delegation has already arrived in the United States. It will be led by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council Rustem Umerov, and Head of the President's Office Andriy Yermak. Among the main topics of the meetings are strengthening Ukraine's air defense, increasing strike capabilities, supporting the energy sector, as well as new sanctions against Russia. Notably, over the past 2 days, there have been active contacts between the Ukrainian and American presidents. Zelenskyy and Trump had as many as 2 phone conversations, the main topic of which was U.S. military aid to Ukraine, including the possibility of transferring Tomahawk missiles. It's too early to talk about the quantity, says Zelenskyy, but he did share his thoughts on who would finance the deliveries. There are several options. The first is that NATO would purchase them and transfer them to Ukraine through its programs. The second is through a mega deal, but this program is still under discussion. There's also the idea on the table of financing through frozen Russian assets.
It's still too early to talk about quantities and capabilities.
Although, to be honest, I have already shared our vision with President Trump. Already.
But some things like that probably aren't meant for a phone conversation.
That's why we'll meet with him in person.
To provide Ukraine with long-range weapons and lift restrictions on their use. A resolution with such a call was adopted by the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. This document, although not legally binding, always serves as a basis for real political decisions, says Chernihiv, head of Ukraine's permanent delegation to the alliance. Members of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly emphasized that Ukraine should be granted the right to strike legitimate targets on Russian territory with Western weapons. In addition, the Assembly called for providing Ukraine with more air defense systems, counter-drone and electronic warfare systems, aircraft, armored vehicles, and intelligence information. The resolution also includes provisions on joint arms production, strengthening sanctions, and the use of frozen assets belonging to the aggressor country. And as soon as tomorrow, alliance members will gather for a meeting in the Ramstein format. On the same day, the Ukraine-NATO Council will take place. The meeting will be held at the level of defense ministers. Denis Shmyhal will be present on behalf of Ukraine. The attendance of Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth and Alliance Secretary General Mark Rutte is also expected. Earlier, Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that Kyiv sees the provision of air defense systems and the procurement of American weapons as priorities at tomorrow's Ramstein meeting. A train collision in Slovakia. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported at least 1 injured Ukrainian. It is known that the young man is 19 years old, and he is already receiving all necessary assistance at the local hospital. The collision itself occurred the day before, in front of a tunnel near the Slovak village of Jablonov nad Turny. The 2 trains were unable to avoid each other at the point where the tracks cross, resulting in the derailment of a locomotive and a carriage. There were no fatalities, but at least 90 people were injured, 7 of whom sustained serious injuries. The Slovak Rescue Service stated that 2 helicopters and several ambulances were dispatched to the scene. The suspect in the high-profile cyclist assault case has had his preventive measure changed by the appellate court. Oleksandr Kilik, who assaulted a cyclist after making a remark, can now be released on bail set at 5 million hryvnias. The man's lawyer says he does not have that amount of money. TSN has been following this high-profile case since day 1. We found the suspect's mansion with a sizable car collection in Bila Tserkva and discovered that he owns several businesses, including a car service center and a clothing manufacturing company. One of his companies participated in supplying clothing to the military and was involved in a case concerning the embezzlement of 25 million hryvnias. In the current case, Kilik is facing 2 separate criminal proceedings. This means that even if he posts bail, he will not be released before October 31st. After all, the detention period for the other case, leaving a victim without assistance, expires only in 2 weeks. Several hundred electric scooters have come to a halt in the center of Ivano-Frankivsk. The city became the first in Ukraine where the local authorities banned their use. For now, this applies to the pedestrian zone. The initiative is explained by numerous violations and traffic accidents. TSN correspondent Ala Paz checked whether pedestrians in the center of Frankivsk have really become safer and what losses entrepreneurs will incur.
I might as well stop trying. This scooter won't go. It's in working order, but it's programmed not to ride on the central streets of Ivano-Frankivsk. The scooter-free zone is the pedestrian center. This includes 3 squares, a park, and several adjacent streets. The decision was made by the city authorities. The reason is numerous traffic violations committed by scooter riders.
We proposed this a year ago, meaning we raised this issue back then. And now the incident that triggered this was when a child was hit by an electric bicycle and ended up in the hospital in the city center, specifically on Vychevyi Square. No one is against scooters or bicycles, but we all want them to follow the traffic rules.
Riding together, under the influence, speeding and weaving among pedestrians. This year in Ivano-Frankivsk, the patrol police have recorded 30 traffic accidents involving scooter drivers. 26 of them are minors. Moreover, every third one isn't even 12 years old.
2 electric scooters were moving toward each other. One of them was already in the wrong because we have a clear separation of traffic. And the third person who was injured was a woman who was simply walking on the sidewalk.
Are these drivers grown-up children?
No. Well, one of them was a minor too.
There are hundreds of electric scooters in Ivano-Frankivsk. Entrepreneurs who rent them out to city residents say they offered a compromise to officials.
We simply asked to lower the speed because we can be controlled. We can even provide all the data, well, upon request. We can provide, the offender's information or even find the person ourselves. We already have user accounts for people who register and we know who is riding that scooter.
But in the end, the business owners agreed to stop the scooters in the pedestrian zone. The opinions of city residents are divided. Some people fully support the ban.
It's mostly people with absolutely no driving experience who ride them. This is a wonderful initiative. It's about safety for children and residents. It's a great tool for leisure, but definitely not in the city center.
Others, on the contrary, believe it would have been better to start by developing the infrastructure.
These scooters are really useful because if you're running late somewhere, they really help.
Both e-scooters, bicycles, and even scooters should be allowed to ride, so it's not right to ban them.
There should be some rules introduced at the state level to regulate scooters as a separate means of transport. But simply banning them is, in my opinion, the easiest way out, not the best one.
Currently, only entrepreneurs who rent out scooters have come under control. Those who own their own scooters are still zipping around the city center as before, even though these gadgets have the option to set a speed limit.
Well, either kids can remove this limit or parents simply don't set it.
The fine for riding an electric scooter in a prohibited area is 840 hryvnias. The city has already started developing the appropriate road signs. And the mayor has also promised a 20,000 hryvnia bonus to law enforcement officers who bring the first 3 scooter riders to justice for violations. Ala Paz, Roman Ducic, Ivano-Frankivsk, TSN 1+1.
The revocation of Odesa Mayor Trukhanov's citizenship. A petition on this matter gathered 25,000 signatures in less than a day. Now, it must be considered by the President of Ukraine. The author of the petition emphasizes that journalistic investigations have repeatedly featured information about Hennedy Trukhanov possessing a Russian passport and a Russian tax identification number, which indicates dual citizenship. He also recalled that the mayor publicly defended monuments with Russian symbols and mentioned the tragedy in Odesa on September 30th, 2025, when people died due to bad weather and inadequate public information. The mayor of Odesa himself, Trukhanov, denies having a Russian passport and recently complained that a commission under the president is planning to consider the issue of revoking his Ukrainian citizenship. Finally, no more spam. Ukrainians will no longer receive spam calls. This was announced by the head of the Ministry of Digital Transformation, Mikhailo Fedorov. According to him, starting from October 2nd, new rules have come into effect that allow operators to block so-called spam numbers. These are, for example, advertising calls, when a company calls you without your consent and promotes a product or service over the phone. Now, every Ukrainian can block such a number. To do this, you need to contact your operator through the app or by phone number. You can see it on the screen. You can also file a complaint with the government hotline or submit a request on the website of the National Commission for the Regulation of Electronic Communications. That's all the news for now. And to find out what this Tuesday will be remembered for, watch the next edition of TSN. Solomia Witvitska, as always, will sum everything up at 7:30 p.m.